maybe we can share the message tonight, because I have a vision, and I want to share with you what that vision is, to create a national conversation around the power of caring. It's the undervalued goodness, the value of virtue of human goodness. It's not the critic who counts. It's not the person who points out how the strong man stumbled, or how the doer of deeds could have done it better. No, the credit belongs to the person who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred with blood and sweat and dirt, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes up short again and again. Because it's not the critic who counts. The reason I share with you that quote is because I have stepped into an arena that I did not expect to step into. And what I want to share with you tonight is my journey. I want to do a couple of things. I want to share with you my journey about how this book came to be. And I want to share with you my story about how an unexpected opportunity came my way. Then I want to share some reading from the book and share with you a little bit of taste of what's in the book. And then maybe we can have some dialogue and some questions and answers afterwards, so that I can make this experience a human experience in our time together that I would appreciate being able to do. So I want to say, I'll just tell you, I have spent the last 25 years traveling around the country doing leadership development programs, helping people be better leaders. And I know Brian and I have met, and we go back a little ways here, and I appreciate very much you coming out. And I spent 3 years writing a book about organizational culture. I've written several books, but I used to think that you had to know something to write a book about it. You know what I've discovered? If you want to learn something, write a book about it and travel around the country and talk about it. It's how you learn. It's how I learn. And I wanted to really learn about organizational culture, and I spent 3 years learning and teaching about organizational culture. And at the end of 3 years, I had this, what I thought was a very a book that was all ready to be published. And I sent it out for reviews, and people said, it's not you. It's very academic, it's very good in theory, but it doesn't represent and come from your heart. So I started to think, what do I really feel called to do? And I was at a point in my life where I want to take it to another level. At the same time, come in, folks, come in. At the same time that I was thinking and reflecting about this, I have a brother, and he's 4 years older than me. And my brother is a rural physician in central Alberta, in a small community in Sundre, in central Alberta. And he was awarded in 2013 Alberta's most outstanding family physician. And he was flown to Vancouver to receive his award with all of the other provincial recipients. 3 days before he was to receive his award, he collapsed in the arms of his wife in his hotel. 5 days later, he was given the grave diagnosis. It was a grade 3 anaplastic astrocytoma, which is about the worst kind of brain cancer you can get. And they gave him about 18 months. Sent him home, flew him into Foothills Hospital. Eventually, we drove him back home. He went into cancer treatment with Tom Baker at the Foothills. And for the past 3 years, he's still alive, by the way, still living at home, cared for by his dear wife and 2 full-time caregivers. And for the last 3 years, I have spent a day a week with my brother. I have spent more time with Hal in the last 3 years than I have in the previous 30. We both went our own ways, he being a rural physician, me being this leadership consultant. And when I would visit him, it became a pause in the music of my life. Because one day a week, I would stop and I would have an opportunity to be in his presence. Now, he has aphasia. About 3 months after his diagnosis, he lost his ability to have speech. He's now totally blind. He only has the use of his one left arm. There's only one left arm. He has one left arm that he can still feed himself. The tumor is on the left side of his brain. It's intersecting 3 lobes in his brain. So he still has the use of this. This is all he has, and he has no more eyesight. So he doesn't have long. But one of the things that I did was that I would wheel him. He lived across the hospital, across the street from the hospital. And I would wheel him across to his hospital where he spent 35 years of his life. And when I would wheel him into the floor and around the grounds, his patients would come and they would hold him in his wheelchair, and they cried. And his staff would come and cry. And his colleagues would come and hug us and cry. My brother was loved as a physician. And I asked people, what made him a great physician? And yes, he was skilled, but there was something underneath that. It wasn't just respect. It wasn't just admiration. There was something underneath it. And what was underneath it is that they said, they answered the question with the same answer that what makes a great leader, what makes a great citizen, what makes a great human being, what makes a great parent. They all said the same thing. He was a great doctor because he cared. And something in me was awakened to say, I need to write and learn about caring. And it was very fascinating. I did not write this book to sell any books. I wrote this book from only one intention, and that is to speak from my heart and leave a legacy for my 3 daughters. If nobody else buys this book, I did not write this to sell this book. I only wrote it because I wanted to leave my philosophy and thinking and experience with this power of caring. So my brother's story starts the book, and my brother's story ends the book, and then in between, I have all kinds of thoughts and experiences and stories about this thing called caring. And what I'm nervous about is that I don't know whether it's going to be valued or not. It's not a sexy topic. I'm not like a hockey star, and I'm not like an Olympic athlete. I'm a person who cares about caring. And I really want and feel very compelled. I feel called, actually, to bring this to our life. Now, the very interesting thing is the very first book launch was done in Calgary. The date was November the 8th. I don't know if anybody, does that spark a date of interest for any of you? It's the day that Donald Trump was voted in as President of the United States. And I thought, I don't want to be that grandiose, but I thought maybe I can bring a message to counter. You know what I've learned? There's 2 kinds of people in the world. There's me people, and there's we people. And if you've ever worked for a we boss, you know what it is like to come to work and feel fulfilled and satisfied and connected and engaged. And if you've ever worked for a me boss, you know how empty it is. Can you imagine coming to work in a place that people don't care? Can you imagine living in a community where people don't care? And now imagine the other side of the coin, where people care about each other. And I just feel called, and I don't have a clue where it's going to go, except this is calling me. So let me share with you a few excerpts from the book and some of my stories that come out of the book. And then I hope that we'll have a chance to have some dialogue and some questions that come out of it. Any questions so far? I want you to feel at home here and comfortable to just have a dialogue with me. So I'll just read this story. It's called Paying Attention, a Radical Notion. How long to the airport? I asked the taxi driver as we pulled away from the hotel. I'd been waiting for his cab for a quarter of an hour, and I was getting impatient. 45 minutes, responded the driver with a smile. I'll get you there as quick as I can." Silence filled the cab as I sat back and took a deep breath. It had been a long day, and I would be glad to be home. If things lined up, I might even catch an earlier flight. A few minutes into the drive, my cell phone rang. It was a coaching client that I enjoyed working with. "This was a good time to touch base," I said. I decided her call was brief. She caught me up on the recent progress with managing her anxiety in her role as leader in a large division. She'd been paying close attention to where anxiety registered in her body. She was taking a few minutes between meetings to breathe and to get centered and to focus on releasing the tension in her shoulders and her upper back. Overall, her call was upbeat. It was good to learn of her progress. She had found she was earning the trust of her team, and she was becoming less stressed. After we hung up, I closed my eyes. I used to have anxiety too. I realized the driver was trying to get my attention. "So sorry for intruding, but I couldn't help overhearing your last conversation. I have been working very hard myself on my anxiety. I used to be so stressed. I used to drive like a maniac and get so uptight when a customer was in a hurry. I couldn't sleep at night. The pressure was getting to me." He was obviously excited to tell me this, and I couldn't help but let him continue. His enthusiasm was contagious. "So how did you learn to relax?" I asked. "I started to meditate. Each morning now I pray and get close to God. I take deep breaths during the day, and I am eating less sugar. That helps too. I'm not cured, but I'm learning. I have doctors who gave me medicine. I tried it for 2 weeks, but all it did was make me tired and numb. So instead, I made up my mind to be happier. I realized that I have to be happy on the inside. Even if I don't get a customer and I start worrying about my wife and my 3 children at home and wondering how I'm going to feed them, I realized I might as well still be happy, because being unhappy doesn't help them." "How do you deal with customers who are in a hurry and want to rush to places?" I asked. "Nobody gets me stressed now." He smiled. "I get them there when I get them there. I will shave off a minute or two if I can to help them out. But you know what? You can hurry without being stressed." I looked up and realized that we were pulling to the curb at the airport. The cab driver jumped out to help me with my door and my bag. We smiled warmly at each other, and I handed him my taxi fare. "What is your name?" I asked, reaching out my hand. "Ajit." He smiled firmly, taking my hand with both of his. "Thank you, Ajit," I said. "It is my good fortune to get a ride from you today. Thank you for gracing me with your patience. The pleasure is all mine." My first message is that we must slow down. Caring cannot be done so much in a hurry. I don't know about you, but when I walk into a store and I buy a piece of groceries or anything from a store, and if I'm in a hurry, that cashier is not a human being. That cashier is an object. And I use the object to accomplish my transaction and get out of the store. But when I'm slowed down and I pay attention that that name tag on that cashier represents a human being with needs and values and emotions, then it opens me to the possibility that caring is a better way to live than rushing my life into using it as a transaction. So that's my first message, is that we must begin to slow down. Caring is a little bit like beauty. When I'm in a hurry, I do not see the beauty around me. I don't see the beauty of the parks. I don't see the beauty of the people in my life. And I don't see the magnificence of life because I'm rushing to get to the next moment. That's my first message. Where's my stories? I recently concluded a session with a group of executives at a retreat center. After all the participants had left, I was packing up my materials and I was preparing for the long drive home when I noticed one of the hotel housekeepers. She was standing by the side table, leafing through some of my books. "You like storytelling, don't you?" she said. "Why, yes," I replied. "How did you know?" "I wasn't just cleaning today. I was listening." A silence fell over our conversation. I was intrigued. "Seeing as you like to hear stories, would you like to hear mine?" she asked. In all honesty, I wasn't in the mood for more conversation. I was tired and I was ready to go home. But something inside of me said, "Stop and listen. This woman has something to teach you." So I sat and I nodded politely and I motioned to her to take a seat. And I continued. And she continued. She pulled up a chair next to me. "I came to this country 10 years ago from Pakistan. I brought little with me, except my children and one set of clothes. I worked hard to support my family as a single parent, since my husband had abused me and abandoned me in my homeland and left me with 4 children to raise. After I came here, I grew very depressed, and I wanted to take my own life. The loneliness of living in a new culture with little support was growing to be unbearable. At a bus stop, I found the number for a distress line, so I called them. The woman on the suicide helpline began the conversation by asking me to talk about my depression and what might be causing me to be depressed. I don't want to talk about my depression. I replied, "Tell me a story. I just want to hear a story." "About what?" she said. "Anything. Just tell me about your day, your life, your dreams." The volunteer fumbled through an anecdote of a situation that had happened to her earlier that day dealing with one of her children. I thanked her, and before I hung up, I said, "I will call you again." A few days later, I found myself calling the distress line again. And when the volunteer answered, I again requested a story. "Oh, you are the woman we have been waiting for. Please hold on for a moment. There's a person here who wants to talk to you." She went and got the volunteer who had been there on my first call. This time, she was prepared with a story. As I listened, tears filled my eyes. And every few days, I would call and request a story. And each day, the volunteer would share a new story. Listening to these stories healed me. They saved my life. I nodded and I smiled. I imagined that telling these stories also undoubtedly healed the volunteer on the other end of the line. What heals? Who's the giver and who's the receiver when it comes to caring? This is something for us to reflect on. I have one more on that. Well, I'm going to move to my next topic, and that is that caring is messy. I didn't want this to be a chicken soup book. I wanted people to be inspired, but I wanted it to be real in terms of the fact is when I sit with my brother and he can't talk, and I tell him stories, and then pretty soon I have no idea what to say. And I sit there completely silent because I don't know what he needs except for me to be there. Caring is the way that we live our lives. It's 2:30 a.m., a single mother holding her sick 2-year-old son in a rocking chair beside her bed. Just as the child cries begin lowering to a whimper and both start to nod off, the child spews vomit all over them. He starts to scream. Patiently, the mother lays him down on the bed as she drags her tired body into the bathroom, fills up a bucket of soapy water, and begins cleaning up the mess. By now she realizes that the screaming child has awakened her 5-year-old brother, who's standing at the bathroom door crying. After attempting to soothe the 5-year-old, she feels the screaming toddler's forehead and has some concern about his temperature. Reaching for the thermometer, she finds that her younger son has a high fever. She runs a cool bath and puts the screaming boy into the water with her 5-year-old sitting on the bathroom floor crying. After witnessing 3 episodes of dry heaving, she is concerned that her younger son is dehydrated, but she can't get him to drink anything. Realizing that the strategy for lowering the temperature is not working, she wraps both children, loads them into the car, and drives them into the emergency care center to have the toddler examined by a doctor. By the time the exhausted mother gets home and has some prescribed medicine for her son, it's 7:30 a.m. Caring isn't always so simple and so straightforward. Caring is complex. On the surface, it seems effortless. We care about a friend, we spend time with them, we listen to them, we send them a gift or a funny e-card. We happily spend time with children or volunteer in an organization that we care about. In reality, while at times caring flows from who we are, it is not necessarily pretty, comfortable, easy, warm, or soft. Caring can be bloody difficult. It means making the best choices we can with the best interest of everyone in mind. A tall order, but this doesn't mean everyone will agree or be happy with us just because of our intent. Sometimes we get stretched in so many different directions, we have no more caring to give. Life presents itself in the most inconvenient and uncomfortable way sometimes, but it's often in those difficult moments that we learn who we truly are. This is the journey of caring. It hurts. It's complex. It's messy. And I portray that in here. It takes courage to care. When I was in elementary school, I remember a little girl who got teased a lot and wasn't very popular. She suffered from epileptic seizures and hung out mostly by herself. Being an outsider, she was frequently tormented. On one occasion, a group of boys was teasing this poor girl when another boy, who wasn't necessarily terribly popular, stood up in front of the bullies, looked them in the eyes, and told them to stop bugging her. The poor kid got punched in the nose for his troubles, and his face bled for the rest of the afternoon. That poor kid went on to be the high school student union president and a talented quarterback, and he eventually became a lawyer and one of the best crown prosecutors in our province. To this day, I wish I would have had the courage to do what he did. It takes courage to stand for something. Do you know, in the midst of our troubled world today, I think Canada stands for something very special. As I travel around this planet, I hope we don't take for granted what we have here, and our love for diversity, and our welcoming of the human spirit. And I actually want to address Winnipeg specifically. First of all, Manitoba gives more, I understand, in charity than any other province in this country. This is a we province. I don't think it's any coincidence that the Human Rights Museum was built here. Do you stop and appreciate the values of what you have in this city, of what we have in this country? When I was checking into Air Canada to fly out here, a Muslim lady checked me in. And with tears in my eyes, I said to her, "I am so sorry, and I hope you feel welcome in our country here." Of course, she's lived here for probably as long, she says, "I've lived here for many, many years." And then she said to me, "This is a time of hope, because at least we're starting to have the conversations. We're starting to be a part of the solution. And let's all of us bring hope and goodwill and caring to this situation." At times, caring happens as a reflex. This is the title of this chapter, is a rescuing hug. At times, caring happens as a reflex. It isn't something we think about or try to do. It's an instinctive response with an open heart. Someone slips and our arm goes out. A pregnant woman struggles to stand in a crowded subway and we gladly give up our seat. The car in front of us is in an accident and we stop to help. A colleague at work is down and we let them know that we care by taking a few minutes in our busy day to simply listen. Babies will often begin to cry when they hear another baby cry nearby. This underscores the infant's innate ability to recognize emotional cues, to experience empathic contagion in their environment, even if the child is not able to comprehend the emotion. It all seems natural and appropriate. We live, and caring is a part of who we are. Caring is everywhere if we open our eyes to be a part of it. Caring seems to come not so much from us as it comes through us. In 1995, a photo appeared in Life magazine with the caption, "A Rescuing Hug," featured premature identical twins, Kyrie and Brielle Jackson. Kyrie had wrapped her tiny arm around her sister Brielle while breathing and heart function were weak and failing. The caring moment heralded a change in how hospitals manage premature and triplet care. The usual protocol was to place all babies, even twins and triplets, inside their separate incubator. It was the twins' nurse, Gail Kasparian, who used her caring instincts and brought the two sisters together. A desperate move, she admits, that went against hospital rules. And when I put Brielle in with her sister, it was amazing. She immediately calmed down. Her heart rate stabilized, and her color changed. They remain close. Over 20 years later, the Jackson sisters have grown up and are now attending college. As her father says, they remain close and still share a bedroom, albeit not an incubator. As their dad, Paul, says, but they're each other's best friend. Caring fosters caring. Learning to be caring is really simply awakening to what is inside of us. My next point is that we have to take care of ourselves. And are we caring toward ourselves? I have, as I share a chapter in here on the darker side of caring, I have struggled with depression in my life. And I inherited the gift of my father's depression. And I see it now as a gift because I could not do the work that I do with leaders and executives and coaching and leading workshops if I had not experienced and gone through the dark side of life. And I've learned how to be caring to my depressive nature because I have learned that harshness and judgment toward that side of me is just as destructive as it is when I get harsh and judgmental toward another human being. Why would it be any different? The only way to emerge from this is through caring. A woman in a grocery store happens upon a grandfather. I attempt to bring a little humor in here, so I hope that you'll find a little humor in this story. A woman in a grocery store happens upon a grandfather with his poorly behaved 3-year-old grandson. It's obvious that the grandfather has his hands full. The child is sitting in the grocery cart, screaming for candy, and in the candy aisle, cookies in the cookie aisle. Same goes for fruit, cereal, and soda. Meanwhile, the grandfather's working his way around, saying in a controlled voice, "Easy, Albert, we won't be long. Easy, boy." Another outburst from the child, and the woman hears the grandfather say calmly, "It's okay, Albert. Just a few more minutes. We'll be out of here. Hang in there, Albert." At the checkout, the little terror is throwing items out of the cart, and the grandfather, again in a very controlled voice, keeps saying, "Albert, relax, buddy. Don't get upset. We'll be home in 5 minutes. Stay cool, Albert." Very impressed, the woman goes up to the grandfather as he's loading the child and the groceries into his car and says, "You know what? You know, sir, it's none of my business, but you've been amazing in there. I don't know how you do it. The whole time that you kept your composure, no matter how loud and disruptive he got, you just kept calmly saying things like things would be okay. Albert is so fortunate to have you for a grandfather." "Thanks, ma'am," replied the grandfather, "but I'm Albert. The little boy's name is Johnny." This poem, written by a 13th century Persian poet, a Sufi poem, Rumi, gives me great strength for handling my darker side of my nature. It's called This Guest House. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness, and some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they are a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house and empty it of all its furniture, still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. You could sit and reflect on that for some time. Depression is not what kills us. It's how we respond and the judgment. If you really want to be depressed, let me give you a little formula for being depressed. Get depressed and then tell yourself that you shouldn't be depressed. And then you'll get depressed about being depressed. Then you're really depressed. What if you could just acknowledge depression is a part of life? Let me listen. You know what my dad taught me? He taught me to take out a journal and write a letter to your depression. And then be your depression and write a letter back. And there have been times when I have written 13 letters back and forth. And my depression is teaching me. I had a doctor tell me once, you know what the key to a long and happy life is? Get diagnosed with a chronic life-threatening illness and have to take care of it every day of your life. I know because I've had to take care of this darker side of my nature, I'm a healthier person today. And I have come to appreciate this aspect of myself. Now I want to read, I have a chapter here on the shadow. And I want to just pay one close attention to the shadow. Then we'll have, I hope, some questions and answers. I was settling into my seat on the Airbus A320, waiting for the usual flight preparations. About a dozen passengers had boarded when the yelling started. Every word was an F word. This aggressive, abusive shouting oriented from the guy in the seat behind me. When I turned around to see what was going on, I saw that he was on his cell phone. I had no idea what the context was or what had triggered such a rage. I only saw his swollen, flushed face absolutely full of fury. The next thing I heard was his cell phone being thrown onto the floor under my seat. It was a distinct noise of there was a distinct noise of plastic breaking, and I could only imagine the condition of his phone after that kind of treatment. I sat quietly for a few moments, getting myself grounded in the aftermath of the emotional turmoil behind me, and as the next group of passengers began settling into their seats, curious, I turned to observe the man again. He was still shaking and raging from the trauma he had just put himself through. Minutes later, an attractive blonde woman stood next to me. Having just entered the aircraft and made her way down the aisle, she now placed her small red carry-on bag in the overhead compartment above the seat of the man with the temper. Within minutes, the two had struck up a wholly polite conversation. Within minutes, the two had struck up a wholly polite conversation, and over the next 4 hours, the man actually charmed her into accepting a date with him. Watching them cheerfully disembark, I wondered, how long would it take before this woman would be introduced to his anger? You see, caring says this: we all have a darker side of our nature. For some of us, we internalize that darkness, and it becomes depression and anxiety. For some of us, and insecurity. For some of us, we externalize, and we become abusive to other people. But either way, it's the same coin, it's just the opposite side of the same coin. I have a very good friend that when we bought our house, you know what the first thing, I was so enamored with this house. We bought this house 8 years ago. I was so enamored with it, I didn't want it inspected. Have you ever been so enamored with someone that you don't want to see their dark side? You don't want to have anything revealed that might look imperfect. I hadn't yet purchased it, but this wise friend, you know what he asked me? What is it that you don't like about the house? Oh, it can't possibly be anything that I don't like. I was so enamored with it that I didn't have it properly inspected. And you know what? It cost us several $100,000 because it wasn't inspected properly, because I overlooked it. When you get married, here's what I've learned. You can tell one indicator of whether a relationship is going to last or not by asking the bride or the groom the week before they get married, what is it that you don't like about the person that you're getting married to next week? And here's what I get concerned about. When one of them turns to you and says, nothing. This person is perfect. This is my true love. We have fallen in love with, it's about as easy to fall into a ditch as it is to fall into love. And I am engrossed with this partner. That's a relationship that I get worried about. Now, when I asked my niece that question, when she got married 2 years ago, do you know what she gave me? She gave me a list. And she said, these are the things that I don't particularly like about Owen, but you know what? I love him anyway. And I embrace him for all he is. Now I know that relationship has a good start, because they know each other well enough to see each other's shadow side and to see each other's darkness and love each other anyway. Because we all have it. But don't think that we have to have an illusion that if we bring it out, it means we have the wrong relationship. But make sure we see it fully. We all have it. Organizations have it. And you know what I tell CEOs? Don't hide. Don't pretend it's there. Don't pretend it's not there. Get down in the cafeteria. You can hand out an employee engagement survey. If anybody's worked in an organization, you've had an employee engagement survey. But get down in the bowels of the organization and find out what's really going on. Earn the trust where people will be honest with you. Don't be afraid of the bad news. Embrace the bad news. Embrace the bad news in your life. And realize that life is difficult. Life is painful. Life is a darker side. And the sooner that we can accept that, the sooner that we will appreciate ourselves and the more we will care about others. When I find myself getting judgmental about what's going on in our world today, this is an indication to say these are part of me that I have to come to accept more in myself. It's an inside job. That is caring. Caring enough to say, you know what? I have an anger problem. I have an addiction. I have a difficulty with an area in my life that's either hurting me or people in my life. And I care enough to find a way through that. I think I've probably talked long enough. Anybody have any thoughts or questions? I know these cameras are a little intimidating, and I hope I'm not intimidating, because I would like us to reflect on this. My purpose in this, folks, is just to have you stop and look at the dimensions of caring. I talk in here about the difference between pleasing and caring. I learned very early in my life that my parents brought pain into their relationship, as we all do. My mother's husband was killed in the Second World War. My dad brought his mental illness into that relationship. And they loved each other, and they fought. And when I was very young, I invested in trying to fix their relationship. I think I was learning how to be a family therapist when I was 5 years old. And I was trying to fix their relationship. And you know what it looked like? It looked like I was caring. Because I would go to my mom and I would talk about my dad, and then I'd go to my dad and I would talk about my mom, and I could stop a fight. And everybody thought, wow, you've got such a caring son. I was not caring. I was surviving. This was my way to survive my family. Now, there's a good side to that. What's the good side, folks? I learned how to be sensitive. I learned how to attune to the feelings that are around me. It's called survival. And I'm very attuned to what people are experiencing. And it made me a good therapist, and it made me a good mediator. But you know what else happened? I identified with it, because it wasn't about caring from overflow. It was caring from emptiness, because I felt so insecure. I had to take care of people in order to identify myself. And I got burned out, because it was no longer about coming from overflow. It was coming from a sense of insecurity. And it was only until I learned how to care for myself. Do you know that I could really fully come from a place of overflow? Do you know the difference between caring and carrying? Caring about someone without carrying them. I've had to learn this on my journey. And I continue to learn it. And I hope that I have some reflections in here if some of you care more about others than you care about yourself. Because one must do both. You know the difference between self-caring and self-centeredness. Self-caring says, I care for myself so I can care for you. Self-centeredness says, I care for myself so I can care for myself. And there's no flow back. It's all about me, and that will end with an empty life. Any thoughts or questions about that? Yes, Colleen, thank you so much, my friend, for coming out tonight.
Great. Enjoyed the meeting very much. Here's this topic that you brought up, the stopping to smell the roses as we go through life. I just have to laugh, because I'm not, in the line, if it's too long a line, I go to the self-checkout, and then I cause myself real frustration, because I have to keep getting the attendant to come help me, and if I just come along,
Yes. You're talking about being impatient and waiting.
And like always in a rush.
Because you're living in the next moment. And I do that too. And I have learned that waiting is not really a very spiritual, if you want to say, quality. Because if you're waiting, when I find myself waiting, I'm waiting for the next moment to live my life. If I'm in a line, instead of waiting, do you know what's a little better response? To take some time and be present to the moment. And to say, where is an opportunity? It might be waiting for a light. It might be waiting in traffic. It might be waiting in line at a store. There's an opportunity for a caring moment. For us to say, where can I show some caring around me? If you ask that question, the world will open up to you. Because we need it. It is a part of the human condition. And I hope that we can honor our value for this in this country. It's what we stand for. Any other thoughts?
David, I'd like to thank you for the sharing. I'll share an experience I had in the Walmart store. I had a cart, had maybe about 10 items in it. And I'm not sure so much on the carrying, but I'll tell you how I handled the situation. And one of the cashiers said, I'm opening up here, so I started to go there with my cart. Meantime, another customer just comes zooming right by me with 2 items in her hand. I said, oh, go ahead. All of a sudden she said, over here, over here. She was calling her husband, and he had a cart that was stacked. He tried to push the cart, by me, and there wasn't enough room. So he said, oh, go ahead, you don't have much anyway. So I went first, and the gal, she was kind of frustrated because she was right in front of me. Finished paying the cashier, she put everything in my cart. I turned around and I walked over to him, and I said, I want to thank you very much because you're a real gentleman. I looked at his wife and I said, you can learn a lot from him. I'm not sure you placed that.
Sometimes caring gets hard. I've been there. I have been there. And we have to be caring with our impatience. Because if we get hard on ourselves that we think that caring means we have to be perfect, that's not very caring. We have to be caring with the human experience to be who we are. And we have to care enough to recognize when that human experience hurts ourselves or others, we need to stop it. Brian, did you have a comment?
I was going to talk a little bit more about the distinction between caring and pleasing.
Yes, pleasing comes from insecurity. Pleasing comes to say, I'm going to meet your needs. See, this is what we talk about in organizations. We talk about servant leadership. If anybody's been a leader, a positional leader in an organization, you understand that servant leadership is a very popular notion. But it's very important to understand what's the difference between a servant leader and a pleasing leader. A servant leader says, I'm going to do everything I can to meet your needs so that you can do your job. A pleasing leader says, I'm going to give you everything that you want so you'll be happy. And if we're trying to make someone happy, that's an indication that we're insecure with ourselves. Because I want you to be happy so that you will be taking care of me. And it's self-serving, indirectly. And it will eventually lead to burnout, because no one can possibly make anybody else happy. This is my experience. Does that resonate? Mm-hmm. So it's important to realize, if you're exhausted from caring, caring is tiring. You know the difference between good tired and bad tired? At the end of a week, at the end of a day of caregiving, at the end of a week of caregiving, of serving and giving to others, ask yourself one question. Is this good tired or bad tired? Good tired says, I gave from overflow, and I just may be a little bit out of balance, and I need to give some to myself. I need to take a day of renewal, take a couple of days off, and you rejuvenate yourself. Bad tired is where you're operating from depletion, and you're misaligned with who you're meant to be, and you're giving as a way of expecting something back because you're not taking good enough care about yourself. This is my experience with this. And to have you reflect on that is something important, I find. Just to say, am I exhausting? Am I trying too hard to take care of somebody else for my own needs because I feel empty inside? I know that that's why I got burned out when I was a therapist, because I tried so hard to take care of my clients because I was so insecure. I defined myself by my ability to care for them rather than just giving freely. And I'm learning how to do that. It's one of the reasons I write books about it, because I get to learn it. Because I'm in this with you all. That help? Mm-hmm. It's a great question. My last paragraph that I will leave you. A sequoia can live 2,000 years. A domestic cat does very well if it makes it to 20. A mayfly, born at sunrise, gone by nightfall. Each life is complete in itself. The quality of our individual life has nothing to do with how long it lasts, and everything to do with how it is lived. My dad took me for a walk when I was 17 years old. He took me up above our barn. He put his arm around me. This was my last year of high school. And he said, you know, you have 4 months before you leave home. Pretty smart guy, my dad was. And he put his arm around me and he said, David, the conventional thing for me is to wish you success. But I am not going to wish you success because I know you will be successful at no matter what you do. This was the encouragement that my father gave me. He said, what I wish for you is that you will, in your life, learn the difference between a successful life and a meaningful life. How many of you would suggest that's good advice to give a 17-year-old? How many of you are aware a 17-year-old had absolutely no clue what his dad was talking about? And I have been on this quest all of my life. What does it take to have meaning in your life? And here's what I have learned on this caring project. Number one, we must find something to care about. Something beyond our own self-interest. A cause. A reason for being. Why do we get out of bed in the morning? We must have a compelling reason that gets us out of bed in the morning, that keeps us up late, that inspires us to go the extra mile. Something that we care about beyond our own self-interest. The second thing is that we must find someone to care about. So that we care about something and we care about someone. Because in the process of caring, it's what makes us human in our own imperfect way. And I hope that I will be a little bit of a pause in your life as you reflect upon this. And my hope is that you'll have conversations about it and start to reflect on it, because it's all part of who we are. Thank you very, very much for coming out this evening.